Hello, good morning, and thank you for inviting me to present about CrowdMap and health at your webinar. I'm sorry I can't be there in person, but I will be in Tanzania next month and hope to see some of you then potentially. So my name is Janet Chapman. I'm a volunteer and trustee with Tanzania Development Trust and also the founder of CrowdMap Tanzania. So Tanzania Development Trust has been working with grassroots organisations in many areas of rural Tanzania for 44 years. We're all volunteers and we have local representatives in the areas where we work. I believe some of you have met our local rep for Kigoma, Benedict Hosea, at the TAMSA. And one of our local reps in particular, Roby Samweli, has been particularly involved in, she's an FGM, female genital mutilation activist in Mara, and she's been doing a lot of work with us, also in using maps to fight FGM. And I'm going to explain first a little bit about that. So I don't know if you know very much about FGM. It's the cutting of female genitalia for cultural or religious reasons. There are 4 main types. This is from the World Health Organization, and it has severe medical and social consequences for women and has no benefits whatsoever. And it is also illegal in Tanzania. However, it is quite prevalent in particular areas of Tanzania, as you can see from this map, right? Because generally it's a tribal issue, so certain tribes practice it. And it happens mostly in a cutting season, which is in the long school holidays. So it recently finished in December, and girls are rounded up and subjected to this. And every year, girls die. But Roby Samweli, who is an FGM survivor herself, she almost bled to death when she was cut age 14. She has since dedicated her life to fighting this terrible practice. She's done a lot of outreach work in villages, particularly in Serengeti, and she also runs some safe houses where girls can come during the cutting season. However, one of the issues with her work was that that area was really poorly mapped, so it's difficult to find villages and difficult to find girls at risk quickly. So girls couldn't find the safe house, and also the safe house staff and the police could not find them. Because rural Tanzania looks very much like the map at the top, you can have settlements of 10,000 people that just don't exist. They don't exist on Google Maps and they don't exist on OpenStreetMap. OpenStreetMap is like Wikipedia for maps. It's open source, it's owned by the community, and everyone can participate. Dar es Salaam has been very, very well mapped, particularly by a project some of you might know called Ramani Haria, which had some funding from the World Bank, particularly to map against flood resilience. Because as you know, Dar es Salaam is subject to flooding very often. So they've made extremely good detailed maps of Dar es Salaam. What we're trying to do is have the same level of mapping eventually in all of Tanzania, particularly rural areas. Because activists and many people, doctors, clinicians, police, community activists, the government, everybody really needs maps for planning, for development. So CrowdMap has been making them for the last 4 and a bit years. We map from satellite images, and we also train people on the ground to map points of interest. So we have around 11,000 online volunteers from all over the world who are mapping from satellite images. That map shows some of the places where they're coming from. But maps are really, really important for many different things, not just FGM. If there are epidemics like Ebola, issues like trying to plan vaccination campaigns against measles or malaria spraying. To plan where new health facilities are needed, you need a good map of what is currently available. And also, to, as I said, to help doctors and FGM activists and the police quickly find girls at risk or patients, etc. So here is one example of a health map. This is about maternal mortality. And as you can see, Tanzania comes more or less in the middle of this. But this map has quite a lot of challenges with it because it shows one colour for each country. Now, would be sure that in a country like Tanzania and anywhere else, there will be a huge amount of variation by region. So examples, this comes from World Pop. So this is trying to actually have much more disaggregated data, which is much more useful for planning. Another example is the Malaria Atlas, and so this is an interactive map. You can change, you can zoom in and see much more detail, and you can also change the year of the data that you're looking at. So very useful to try and work out where the hotspots are, and also which areas have made progress over time. So maps are very, very useful from many health perspectives. This shows a map of health facilities in Kigoma. So you can see that this area of Kigoma is pretty well mapped now because we've done a lot of mapping here. So you can see the map of Kigoma as a whole and how many hospitals and clinics are in there. And you can also start to do things like compare the clinic locations to population density. So all of this is, again, is an interactive map, and you can play around with it at the link there on the Crowd2Map website. So when Ebola was declared in DRC, that people needed maps very, very quickly, but generally they don't exist. This is the kind of map that people like MSF, Doctors Without Borders, and other staff were relying on at the beginning. So they started to collect data, right? Generally using things like maps.me, but also Open Data Kit, which is a really good open source way of collecting data. So adding where the locations of the health clinics are, and a little bit of information about them. And also they organize people to map. So map from satellite images and to add that data into the map. And then they ended up with maps much like this, with a huge, much better maps with a huge amount of detail. And one of the good things about OpenStreetMap is it's a place where many different people can add data. So it becomes a way for different organizations to share the data that they're collecting. Open data that has no privacy implications, such as location of clinics, location of visits, location of vaccination centers, roads, buildings, etc. Open data. And this is really, really useful for planning new sites that are needed for Ebola, for epidemiology, for backtracking where patients have come from and where their contacts might be, to plan things like ring vaccination campaigns, and also just to navigate, to work out how to get to particular villages. So the map on the left, again, is a paper-drawn map where people were starting with, but they started to crowdsource volunteered information into OpenStreetMap and eventually make a much better map that can be used now, but also in the future by everyone. So how do we do this mapping? So OpenStreetMap is free to anybody to use. if you just go to OpenStreetMap.org, you can search for the place where you want to look and start using it straight away. You can use it on a laptop, a computer, your phone, whatever. But if you want to start editing, adding to the map, which is what we're doing, then you have to create an account, which is free. And then if you go to a particular place, you can zoom in and you can start to see satellite images. So this is a satellite image of a place in Mara. And you can see that there are roads here, and you can see that there are some small huts buildings here. And I can add a building. So I can just draw around a hut. I can click area, draw around a hut. It becomes highlighted like that. I can click, this is a building. Because the only thing I know about that is it's a building. It's probably a house. I doubt it's a clinic, but I don't know anything about it. So if you're mapping from satellite images, you can see the roads and the buildings, but you don't have any local knowledge to add. For that, you need people on the ground. But you can also, some data is open government data. So for example, school data and clinic data. You can get the coordinates of all the schools and clinics in Tanzania and add them to the map. And this is what we've been doing. So here, on this site there are the government data, and you can add that. But also we've been training people to use a very good smartphone app, again free, called Maps.me. Maps.me uses OpenStreetMap data. And if you're traveling around, particularly out of places like Dar es Salaam, if you try to use Google Maps, it's hopeless. A, because there is very little data, and B, because it doesn't work very well offline. Maps.me works perfectly offline. So you install it, and then you download the map of Tanzania, and then you don't need any connectivity. You can search for where you want to go. Here, you can then get directions to it, and it will tell you turn left, turn right, etc. But the best thing about this is that you can add data. So if you click on where you want, where you are, you can zoom in and zoom out. And then if you click here, you can add a point to the map. You choose what type of place it is, and then you can add it. To add things so that everybody can see them, you need to link this with your OpenStreetMap account. So I would really urge all of you to create an OpenStreetMap account. It's very straightforward. You go to this site, you fill in your email address, and then you click on the confirmation. And then you can start mapping. You can start mapping on a laptop. You can start mapping on a phone using Maps.me. Both are fantastic. So we've set up some tasks to certain areas that we're mapping, which is on the tasks site at the top. But you can map anywhere you want to using that site, OpenStreetMap.org. So for example, we've been adding some buildings in Moshi. And this is one example. But we can also just directly map into OpenStreetMap. So if you look at OpenStreetMap, you can search for wherever you want, and it will come and tell you, and then you can zoom in here and start editing or start looking. The other thing that I would really urge you to do is to, if you're involved with a university, then you can set up a youth mapper chapter. This is a student mapping society that meets to do mapping, and the youth mappers have lots of different opportunities. For example, scholarships to go to conferences, to State of the Map America, to the Global State of the Map, which this year will be in Cape Town, South Africa, but also for internships, etc. So this is a really good opportunity. There's more details on the on this site, Youth Mappers, or otherwise feel free to email me. So I would really urge you to look at OpenStreetMap, to look at our website, Crowd2Map. If you're at all interested and want more details, then please get in touch. That's my email address, and that's Twitter. Please get in touch. Now I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.